Hey, good morning, good evening, good lunchtime, whatever it is, wherever you are. Welcome to sunny Edinburgh and to the this week's episode of the ITSM Explorers, where we're going to be talking about ITSM tool selection and the whole shopping cart experience. But before we start that, this is a live stream. So we have got a bit of space down the bottom of the screen, and we would like to bring in your comments and questions, and you can interact with us as we go through. I'd love to know where you are. I'm in sunny Edinburgh, and we'll find out shortly that Steve will be joining me is in sunny Essex. So let us know your name and where you're calling in from, and drop it into the comments there. You can even fire off a few emojis if you really want to, and questions as we go along. Yeah, we'd love to take questions, or indeed, if you've got any of your own opinions that you want to drop in, then do that, and we'll bring your beautiful face up on the screen and give you a shout out. So this is part 3 of a 4-part series with regards to ITSM tool selection. So the first part was 10 helpful tips, where we talked about things that you might want to look at before you start the tool selection process. We then had a look at the ultimate mind map with over 200 different features that you might be interested in. So some of those you may not even know you could ask for. So that was the mind map. We'll come back to that in a second. We're now at the shopping cart element, where we're going to review put my teeth in straight this morning, reveal a few secrets about how sales work and how you might be able to get a few deals and a bit of discount and navigate the whole licensing model. And then part 4, we're going to look at, once you've got a new tool, how do you transition to that new tool? So can you take it out the box and just use it? And is that even possible? Well, I think that's probably more Steve's area than mine, but we're going to be looking at that in the next episode. So I keep talking about the different episodes. These are all available now on our fledgling YouTube channel. If you go to the top QR code there, you can join our wonderful subscriber list on YouTube. There's about 3 hours of us talking about ITSM maturity assessments. Then there'll be another 3 hours of us talking about tool selection. And if you want the mind map, go to the QR code at the bottom there. You will be taken to the IT 500 website. There's 3 little blocks, and if you click on the one that says mind map, it will take you to an area where you can download a HTML interactive file off the mind map. There's nothing to sign up for, just go and get it. The only caveat there is just make sure that within your organization that you can download HTML files. If you can't, then direct message me and I'll see what I can do for you. So what does that mind map look like? We're not going to go into this in this episode, but it's stuffed full of interesting things that you might want to go have a look at and reprioritize as your own mind map. So this is just a brain dump, really. Tons of information there. What I need you to do is to go back and have a look at the previous episode if you want to know more about the mind map type stuff. So that's a quick review of where we were today. So without further ado, it's time to bring on my co-host. We are live with Steve Morgan. How are you doing today, Steve?
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, I'm not too bad. Those of you who are watching this may have noticed I've got a bit of a red eye. Contrary to popular belief, the people who I had managed to offend in previous episodes haven't come to get me in the middle of the night. I've got a bit of an infection, but my wife told me to say you should see the state of the other guy. It's a little bit off-putting. It's more off-putting for me than it is for you, but I'm here. The brain and the mouth still work, and it turns out 50% of the eyes are okay too. So we're thinking positively today, Martin, in sunny Essex.
Well, I'll make sure that I'm reading out any of the comments that appear, rather than you having to strain your single eye. So I'll do that on your behalf. So we've got a lot to get through today. So I think we should probably just sort of flick on and power through.
I agree.
So we have a little agenda up the top. it's more of an aid memoir for us to remember what we're about to talk about than a specific agenda. So if there's anything that anybody out there wants to add in, then feel free to drop stuff in the comments, and we'll see if we can adjust the stream to suit whatever you want to talk about. But to start with, this is an old coin, and it's kind of representing the history of IT service management. So I just wanted to briefly touch on that. Um, there were days gone by where you could physically go and touch the machine that your software was on. And in those days, what tended to happen was you would pay a large sum of money to purchase an ITSM tool. And then there would be ongoing support and maintenance, probably around 20% mark going forwards. Now, that all changed when SaaS appeared. And I can't remember the last time I saw a purchase of a tool followed by software and maintenance. I think it's all SaaS now. So why is that so appealing? Well, the truth of it is, it's because it's very predictable. You know what you're paying each year with a SaaS subscription, or so it would appear. We may blow a few of those myths, but not only is that good for you as somebody who's paying the money out, also the vendors love it as well because they've got a predictable revenue stream. So previously they had a sort of lumpy revenue stream. That's not very good. So the vendors like it, and also the investors like it as well. So they love a predictable revenue stream for a company. So hence early adopters of the SaaS model have been incredibly successful, and so much so that now pretty much every vendor is taking that SaaS model. However, it's not always as straightforward as it seems. There are all sorts of different licensing models, and it's not just based upon pure headcount. You would think you just count up the number of agents you've got and then you're sorted. Well, that's just one of many, many models. So let's run down a couple of these, and I've made some notes just in case I forget because there's so many of them. So I guess the first thing that I quite like about a lot of companies now is that some of their models are quite transparent. So you can go onto the web, you can look at the website, and it will tell you it's $15 for an entry level user or $75 for an advanced user, and it will list out all the features you get. I quite like that in terms of transparency, but maybe only 50% of the vendors will do that. A lot of people are kind of hiding their costs, and partly is the reason for that is that they don't want you to know that somebody else is getting something much cheaper than you are. So there are some sort of hidden elements there. You may have to ask for costs, but you can certainly get a rough idea of costings by looking on most websites. But be careful, we're going to talk about extra costs and things which might be included in that cost and things that may not be included in that cost. So I'm doing quite a bit of talking here, but I'm probably because I work for 3 different vendors and I've been through so many pricing models, it's unbelievable. So other models that you might have, a site license, I think that's a bit of a misnomer, and I'm giving away secrets here. Site licenses tend to be priced based upon the vendor already knowing how big you are, and therefore pitching the price based upon how big you are, knowing you're not going to kind of double in size or anything like that. So you can sit there in a cozy world and think, oh, I've got a site license, and isn't that wonderful value for money? But the reality is, you only if you're only going to use half of it, what's the point in having the other half? So, watch out for site licenses. I'm not a great fan. I don't think much of them unless you've got something like a seasonal business where Christmas time you're employing twice the amount of people that you normally employ. Then that can be useful. But most vendors will also have an occasional license user model as well. So that's a different license model. You've also got the pay for what you use model. And I think I quite like the idea of just paying for what you use. but I thoroughly suspect that most people will have a very good idea of what they are likely to use anyway. So I'm not sure that that's a great advantage. So most people will focus upon agent count. Now, just be careful that there might be differences in different roles. And I think I'm going to hand this over to you because I've talked enough, Steve. Different
Yeah,
roles,
this is
go
one
for it.
I constantly come up against this, right? So typically, you'll have the person who is raising tickets, having tickets assigned to them, etc. They typically work in our example here, the IT department, but we'll come on to other modules later. They could work in HR, facilities. They're dealing with cases, for want of a better phrase. And that's pretty easy. P times Q license model, how many of them, how much money, all good. But then you can get held up, and I've fallen foul of this with things like approvers. So if your business process is that every request that a user makes needs to be approved by a line manager, then that line manager may need an additional license type, which is more money. You need to know how many of those there are. You may need to change your business process to say, well, actually, we're going to get all requests approved off the tool, or we're going to not have an approval. We're just going to allow a free for all. So both business approvers that approve the spend and technical approvers who approve that Martin can have his shiny new MacBook Pro as a piece of hardware on his desk um, are things that which can catch you out. The other thing which has caught me out in the past also is requesters. So those people who do make those requests on the portal and those people who log incidents, etc. In a lot of tool providers now, they are free, but I have been caught out in the past with, oh, actually, no, if you've got people logging those types of tickets and incidents and requests, then there's a cost associated with them. So if you think about going back to my two examples there, how many line managers you have in your organization, and how many possible requesters you have in your organization, and there's a license cost associated with that, potentially your overall cost grows quite significantly. So look out for that.
Yeah, and we can be into thousands and thousands of users, and even if they're only a few pounds each, suddenly that can be a massive cost. Now, as she's mentioned, I think most organizations, software vendors don't do that these days, but look out for it, because if you're looking at an agent price per head and you think, oh, that looks quite cheap, if you suddenly find out that the requesters are required or approvers are required, they call them end user licenses or runtime licenses, all sorts of different names. But do look out for those, because they're likely to be significant volume and therefore cost you quite a bit of money, even if it's only a low individual cost. So look out for those particular elements. And there's other things as well that you need to look out for. So again, I'm going to go back to those published costs that you see per agent head. Sometimes they include a lot of things, and sometimes they don't. So let's just move on to the next slide. And this one is kind of meant to represent additional costs and total cost of ownership. So a few things to watch out for. Steve mentioned there, I think briefly, sort of HR and FM and things like that. And possibly you're going to expand your service desk tool into enterprise service management. If you do that, what you want to do is make sure that the vendor isn't suddenly going to charge you for a new instance of the software. So some won't, but some will. So some will say, here we go, enterprise service management. Of course you can do it. And then when you say, right, I do want to include my HR department, they'll suddenly say, oh, actually, but you need another instance of the software to do that.
Or indeed for not just another instance, but an additional license type that might have an additional cost associated with it. And just while we're talking about that, be careful when you're getting the demos from your tool providers, your prospective tool providers, that what they're showing you is clearly delineated as to what license model it exists within. So they might well say, hey, we're going to send this ticket now from the ITSM tool into facilities, and you'll be being demoed some functionality that actually represents quite a significant cost. Same is true of some other additional modules like reporting and those kind of things as well, and some of the integrations which you've got to look out for. So not everything is as it appears. Be suspicious in a friendly way, but be healthily suspicious of what you're being shown, just to be absolutely clear of what's included and what needs additional cost. Because you might see the demo and go, "Hey, yeah, this is great. This is exactly what we wanted," and then find that the cost is a lot higher. But of course, you will have used Martin's requirements mind map, so your requirements will be straight and clear, and any additional things will be delineated separately. But watch the previous episode to get some more information on that.
And I think that's a great point. When you get demoed stuff, let's take chatbots as an example. You can get a demo that's got a chatbot in it, and the whole thing looks very fluid and it looks great. And then when you get your quote, you look at your quote and it seems quite reasonable. And then they install stuff and you find out there's no chatbot. Where's the chatbot? Oh no, that's an integration to a third-party tool. Oh, so you'll have to go out and buy the third-party chatbot and maybe pay for an integration as well.
And just to be careful here, we talked about SaaS right at the top of the program. So you'll be working in organizations, guys, I'm sure, that have approved software and approved architecture as well. So if you're buying a SaaS product that is in the cloud, couple of things: be suspicious of, or what cloud is it? Does it just sit on AWS and you pay a separate subscription, or is it a private cloud that the vendor owns? But if you're then joining together separate cloud products across, like, say, for example, a chatbot and an ITSM tool, perfect example, Martin. If you're working in an environment that has security concerns, in other words, the data model might include personally identifiable data, or data that's secure or sensitive in your organization, then be really careful about what that architecture looks like. So when you see the functionality, say to the vendor, well, how does that work then? What actually do we need under the hood to make that work? Make sure that you've got someone from your architecture team who's sitting there scratching their chin sagely, saying, yeah, that would comply with our corporate standards, or it wouldn't.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to asking the vendor, do we get in your cost proposal everything that we've seen in the demo? And if the answer is yes, then brilliant. But frequently you may well find there are other products that they've shown you and interfaced with and made themselves look good that actually are not part of their suite at all.
So, having a sore eye is obviously good for me, Martin. We're on fire today. This is really good, really good advice, I think. Have we had any comments yet in the chat from anybody?
No, but as we go through, I'll keep an eye on it, and if it does, then I'll preempt a couple of comments, because there are other things that people need to look out for. Upgrade costs, right? There may or may not be a cost for an upgrade. There may well be associated consultancy for an upgrade. So if upgrades are in the mix, and they're not always, because some platforms have automated upgrades, but if they're in the mix, then you need to factor that in as part of your total cost of ownership. Contracts, look out for your contracts and potentially them increasing every year. And I can tell you, having worked for vendors, I've worked for companies where they just slap 10% increase on every year on your contract. So just look out for the clauses whereby a contract may increase in price, because you're going to want to cost this over maybe 5 years rather than just year one. Other things, training. So if a product suddenly requires a load of certified training, and some do, in particular if you've still got an open database at the back end or reporting tools that you have to do scripts for, just factor in the training cost. They may well want a whole bunch of your staff to fly off to the M4 corridor somewhere and spend a week getting trained and charge you 2.5 grand for it. So just be careful to include training costs as well. And then implementation costs. Over to you, Steve, while I get a slight drink.
Yeah, implementation costs. Wow, you've got to be really careful here, right? So the vendor will almost certainly say, we have an implementation methodology. It takes 12 to 15 weeks. This is what we do. This is the scope. And you might, for example, have what you think is a really good request catalog today or a really good CMDB. But actually, when you look at it in more detail, you think, oh, actually, there's a bit of additional work needed on the design side there. And I mentioned earlier on about a good example of that around approvers. So if your approvers are currently business approvers and you want to change the way that works, then there's a bit of process analysis there. The vendor's standard product will not include that business analysis, professional services, consulting, whatever you want to call it. So you've got three options at that point. So option number one is get someone in really clever who's done it before to help you. Other consulting firms are available, but option two is do it yourself, and that could be good, but you've got to be careful that you're going to do it to the right standard that the vendor wants. And option three is get the vendor to do it for you. And often getting someone independent, as I've already alluded to, can be a good way of making headway with these things. But it's all additional cost. And professional services costs will be assumed at a level in your proposal you'll get back. But you'll have a day rate, essentially, that for anything additional. And that's going to be in the region of 12 to £1,500 a day, in my experience. So just be cautious of all those additional things around business analysis, professional services. And Martin, one of the other things we talked about earlier was project management, wasn't it? And the additional overhead involved in that. Did you want to cover that one off?
Yeah, I mean, I think at a starting point, the buyer beware to some degree of standard implementation packages, which appear to be, 20 days, 30 days, something like that. They probably include some project management. That will certainly cost you more than your standard consultancy. So you need to decide how much project management you want. But there's a sort of a swings and roundabouts here. These guys will have done it hundreds of times before. So the chances are that it's definitely worth paying for them to project manage with you the implementation. So I wouldn't just ditch project management because it appears to be expensive. It's going to help you.
I agree. I
But
agree.
do beware of a basic implementation package, because what you'll have no doubt been demoed will have been the sun, the moon, the sky, everything. And then suddenly they'll give you an implementation package and you'll find it's just incident management, or it's incident and a bit of service request or something like that. So the tool will be up and running, but it won't be singing and dancing and doing
Yeah, a
everything
good
that you've
example
seen.
of that, Martin. You'll have I don't know, like 10 request types configured in the scope of the contract, and you've got 270 requestable items. You've got a bit of a shortfall there. Are they going to train you on how to do it, and then you do it yourself? In which case, you've got a bit of effort involved in doing that. Some evening and weekend work coming up potentially for the people on the desk, or they do them all for you. And if they do them or you do them, you've also then got to consider, well, who's going to test it? And there's quite a lot of internal effort around things like business analysis, testing, etc., that is, that could soak up quite a lot of time.
Yeah, so don't forget your internal cost guys as well. So your internal guys, they're not free really, and there may be
No,
some sort of wooden dollar exchange, but do bear in mind, as Steve's just said, if you suddenly want to configure a whole whole raft of stuff within the desk, then it's going to cost you time. So you need to factor that in to your overall cost of ownership. So total cost of ownership is the message there. And I was actually doing a bit of a search around for a sort of total cost of ownership sort of icon representative. So the one I've got here, this I didn't particularly like, so I was looking for other ones, and I thought, I'll go to AI, and AI can now sort of pick out things for you that may represent total cost of ownership, but it doesn't always work. Total cost of ownership. What are they?
Burritos, tacos,
tacos. Total cost of ownership came back with various pictures of tacos for me. So AI, don't always trust AI. It's nothing to do with tacos, but that's what it wanted to give me. Tacos for total cost of ownership. Definitely worth clipping that one out. Next up, there's a few more of these to go through. So we'll just press on. So where to get a deal? Where to get a deal? So primarily, actually, the reason I put this off was to talk about partnerships, but let's whack off a couple of things first. If you're in education or if you're a charity, you may well be able to get pricing, which is great for you. You already know that. We don't have to tell you that. Most other people will not get that. If you're in the public sector, you may want to buy off a framework. So on a framework, the prices are probably going to be published out there. Certainly they are on the government frameworks. They are then fixed. So you're not going to get a deal as such. However, you may save yourself a huge amount of time in terms of the tender process. So quite often it's worth going and having a look at frameworks and asking the vendor what frameworks they sell on, because you can then just go buy something. Effectively, they've done the due diligence for you. So you don't have to go through all of that process and prove it to anybody. So you can just go buy from the framework. It will cost you probably a little bit more, but it may well balance out nicely when you can consider just how much it costs you to run a tender. So back to partners. Now, again, I'm going to throw a few things in here. There's a couple of big tools out there that have got massive partner networks. You may think that you can play one partner off another partner in terms of getting a good deal. The likelihood is that you won't be able to. And here's the reason. If a new opportunity appears, a partner will register that centrally with the vendor. What that means is nobody else will be able to work on that opportunity for, let's say, 90 days. It's typically something like that. So you will not be able to go to two different vendors who sell the same product and bounce one off the other. That just won't happen. So you can't really get a deal, but there's some interesting things to do with partner networks, again, revealing a few secrets. Some partners will sell software at cost. So they will buy it from the vendor and they sell it on with a markup normally. But some will sell it at cost just so they can get the consultancy, because they can see the consultancy revenue as long term. They also will have a partner structure, bronze, silver, gold tier. That's based upon revenue that they bring in, and in particular, new customer names. So they will be
customer satisfaction.
Yeah, and so there's some weird and wonderful things that go on with partner networks or direct, but the bottom line is the prices may well vary direct and through the partner network. So it's going to be a difficult one, because as soon as you talk to somebody, that deal's going to be registered and you're going to be stuck with whoever you spoke to first. So just be a little bit careful before you go speaking direct to the vendor. You might want to go have a quick chat with a couple of partners. So up to you, but the partner, if they're quick off the mark, will go register that deal. So I know you've had more dealings than me with partner networks. So any other tips from that side, Steve?
Yeah, so go with a partner who suits the complexity of your implementation. So if you've got a really simple implementation, you don't need the top of the tier partner to do that for you. But if you're in a really large, complex organization, then look for on the vendor's website their ratings for their partners. They will typically publish them, and if the vendor doesn't, the partner almost certainly will, because he'll want you to know that he's a premium or platinum or whatever you want to call it, leather partner. Um, and you also want to be getting a partner who you can work with, right? Because as Martin's already alluded to, the license costs are half of this. The other the other bits of it are the implementation consultancy and then potentially the ongoing managed service as well. So this has got to be an organization that you can work with. And as we all know, all organizations have a different DNA, a different culture, a different way of kind of how it feels to work with them, um, and you want to be able to find a partner who you can relate to. A good way of doing that is at a trade show. I know Martin's had some experience organising these trade shows, but things like the service desk show as well are a good thing, a good source of at least talking to people and saying, well, is this a partner that seems to operate in a similar kind of way to how I do? You know, are they formal? Are they relaxed? Are they friendly? Are they, you know, tied to a particular methodology or whatever? Hopefully, they're all, you know, they're the things that you need. But it's it's like finding a partner in life, right? You need to find someone that you can ultimately work with over the long term.
And I think
Um,
that brings up a really good point, actually. I quite often have seen people who change partners, and the primary reason they change partners is trust, because
yeah,
there are some partners out there who will slap on change control documents continuously and say, that wasn't in the original scope, we're going to charge you more. And they see the client
mm,
as just a cash machine, and
yes,
they just keep adding in these all the time, all the time, all the time. I
indeed.
think that's probably the major reason that I see people swapping partners, is that they've gone in,
Mm,
got into bed
mm,
with a partner, and then they've disappeared down the whole. You've changed stuff. You've changed the scope. We're going to charge you more. We're going to charge you more. And then the other thing they do is they put their best people on to start with, and then once you've signed a deal, suddenly you're lumbered with some junior doing your implementation for you. So just that's something to be aware of, rather than anything to do
yeah.
specifically with a deal. But you may want to, when you're putting your deal together, have named consultants that you want to work with throughout your implementation. So if you
Mm,
found somebody you thought was brilliant as you've started off the implementation and you've been talking to them pre-sale, maybe you want to get a specific named consultant in
mm.
there working for you for consistency and for quality. So it can make a huge difference as well.
It can do, yeah. Make sure though that you know that pre-sales consultant who you fall in love with is unlikely to be involved in the implementation because they'll be off doing pre-sales for the next client once they're finished with you. So yeah, make sure that you meet some of the implementation team, and again, you know, try and understand how those folks work. I've seen some slow motion car crashes in my life where you know organisations land and they come in, you know, wearing brightly coloured um, polo shirts with logos on and bounce around the organisation and you know are not generally well received. So really get to grips with how it's going to be implemented, who's coming in, what are they going to do, what are the timescales. You know, get a project plan, something a bit more detailed than a plan on a page if you can help it. Um, and think about that. So yeah, going back to the partners thing then. So we talked a bit about reputation, credibility, trust, culture. All those things are really important, and having someone you can work with. But you might also want to then think about, well, you know, where are these people based? You know, are they UK based, for example? If you're a UK client, you know, make sure that they have people who are not going to be sitting at the end of a Teams call for the duration of the implementation. That actually you might get to meet some folks and build a relationship with them, because doing it all remotely is extremely challenging. So beware those kind of offshore implementation resources. Every vendor's got some, but make sure you've got someone who is based in your territory, who will be able to come and see you and talk to you if you need to, rather than relying solely on those offshore resources.
Yeah, and I think the offshore resources thing improved greatly during COVID. So
Definitely.
I think that's, it's got, and there's far better collaboration tools as well. But I'm going to come back to pre-sales consultants actually, just to give away another secret. These guys are super slick at demoing, really good, because they're in there all day, all night, trying to make the product look as good as possible. When you get the product, it will never look as good as you see the pre-sales consultant do it. And here's a secret. Who do you think in the company gets the newest, fastest, best laptops in the world? And I'm going to tell you, it's not the CIO or the CFO. It's not even the sales guys. It's the pre-sales guys. They have the best kit that you can possibly get. So whenever you see a demo, it's going to be golden, because they have got the best, the best of the best. They're in there day in, day out with that stuff. So
Yeah.
just set your expectations, regardless of who it is you're working with.
And on the subject of demos as well, all pre-sales consultants have some pre-canned demos within the tool. So they're going to come and show you onboarding of a new service provider, or joiners, movers, leavers, something like that. That they've been through 100 times, and it's really slick. You might want to define your own demo workflow and say, well, can you build that out for me then? Because if the tool is as simple to build out and easy to configure as they're saying it is, it shouldn't take too long to build something out which is bespoke for yourselves, rather than dealing with a generic thing which you might find quite difficult to relate to your particular organization.
And I think I would 110%, if it's possible to have that, agree with that. So many demos run end to end seamlessly, but if you throw a little spanner in the works, they fall apart, and they've only got 2 knowledge articles or something like that in their knowledge base. So you immediately get to the correct solution. Some of them are just bonkers, but we'll not get into that too much, because I want a couple of other things to talk about. And this is probably one of the biggest. So listen up, everybody, when to get a deal. So we talked about partners and things like that. And there's not always that much flexibility in dealing with people if costs are published out there anyway. I know I went to buy a car on behalf of somebody with my super dealing hat on, ready to haggle. And the salesman basically says, you've been on the web, you've looked at all the prices for everything, you know this car it is good value, and that you can't find it anywhere else. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come and seen me. So forget about it. New set of mats, that's all you're getting. So to some degree, you may find that there's a bit of that goes on with IT service management tools. But I'm here to tell you, as an ex-salesman, when to get a deal is the biggest thing in the world. So every salesperson is driven by lines in the sand, and those sand lines appear every quarter. So if you want to go get a deal at the beginning of January, you're not going to get one, because the sales guy and all its management team will just think, I've got a whole year to hit my number, so I'm not really interested. But they will have a number for Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And if you're placing an order, aim for one of those quarters. The best one is the end of the year. So it's normally December for most organizations. If you place your order in December, I absolutely guarantee you will save yourself a whole heap of money. And that's because the salespeople will want to hit their targets for the year. That's number one. So it's about hitting their targets. But if they've actually already hit their targets, there's a very good chance they're on what is called multipliers. So once you've gone beyond the sales target, you don't get your standard rate commission, you get a much higher rate of commission for going above and beyond effectively. So a salesperson in December looking at a deal coming through will do almost anything to make sure they get that extra percentage. So absolutely 100% time when you make your purchase.
And
That
if
will
you
be,
get, yeah, sorry, Martin, I've got excited there for a minute. If you get that cracking deal that you've managed to drive out, then get it baked in to the contract as well, because often you'll then find that's only a year one price, and not a year two, three price or year four, five price or whatever. So if you think you've got a really good deal, then by all means make sure you get it baked in for as long as possible.
yeah. And I think that that brings us on to the nice bit or the next bit, which is where can I get other discounts apart from the time? Like the time, I'm not kidding you. The time will be the biggest one. If you can place orders end of December, that will be your biggest discount. But how else can you get discounts? Steve mentioned contracts. The salespeople will want you to have a long contract. So they'll want you to sign up to 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. That's good for them. They'll get better commission on that. They probably, believe it or not, won't get commission on the years beyond year one because it doesn't always work that way. They tend to get their year one commission, but they may get bonuses for signing you up for multiple years. They certainly aren't going to get commission on 7 years worth of business for you on day one. No salesperson will get that. But by signing a longer contract with them, you may well get, 5 years for the price of 4, something of that ilk. That's the sort of volume that you could potentially be considering, and it's definitely worth it. And as Steve mentioned, make sure those prices are not going to go up for the duration of your contract. So that's something to look out for. Look out for things that are too cheap. If somebody's suddenly offering you something which is, I don't know, 20% of the price of somebody else, there's a reason for that. You're not comparing apples with apples, or
Mhm.
that vendor is totally desperate for your business. If they're desperate for your business, I'd be a bit cautious, right? There might be a reason. They might be very keen, but there's a difference between very keen and desperate for your business. So look out for things that are too cheap, but do go out and get quotes from similar vendors. So don't use a SysAid at one end and a ServiceNow at the other end of the spectrum and expect to get the similar pricing from them. You're not going to. They're totally and utterly different tools. But if you're picking two vendors who are closer to one another in one of your magic grids, then by all means go get comparative quotes and say, can you match this pricing? It's kind of difficult because they all use so many different pricing models. So you really need to then go back to the total cost of ownership and say, this is the total cost of ownership for product A. Can you match that total cost of ownership and make sure that you put in all of my costs into that? So that's one thing. The other thing is that you are valuable as an asset to the vendor. So if you are willing to do case studies, act as a reference site, stand up at a conference and do a speech, maybe do a video testimonial. If you say to the vendor, I will do all of these things for you on provision of you give me a discount, and of course, me genuinely liking the product and your services, then
Mm.
that is of great value to a vendor. And I think you had a couple of good examples, Steve, of where that is particularly impactful as well.
Yeah, I think trying to remember what I was going to say now. Um, I think if you've got someone who can stand up and do that for you, it does make a massive difference, particularly if it's in a similar sector or a similar geography to what you're in. So that particular service management tool provider might be, for example, trying to get into financial services, and you might be a financial services client and their first one. So it'll be great to stand up and do that kind of talk. Similarly, if it's a new geography for that service provider, that would help them immensely. So they might invite you to go along to one of their user groups or community groups or something and do a talk there. I've done one or two of those myself for various vendors. And it is really helpful, but it does come back down to finding the right partner as well, and finding the right tool so that you feel confident enough to be able to do that kind of reference case study thing. And you might not want to commit to that at the time of signing the contract, because you won't have gone through any of the joy or pain of having configured and implemented the tool in the first place.
So I think that brings me on to what probably is going to be about our final point, because we're zipping through the hour, or 45 minutes to an hour, which I knew we would. But other things that are of value to the vendor is the long-term relationship. And Steve's talked about the partnership and things like that. So, of course, they want you to be a referenceable site, and that's of value to them. But they also want to grow your business with them effectively. So they will be looking for cross-sells and upsells all the time. So if you can potentially dangle a few of those as carrots in front of them to say, yeah, we're thinking of going into HR with the tool and FM with the tool, and maybe bringing in, the London branch or the Manchester branch, whatever it's going to be. If you can say to them, yeah, we're thinking of doing that, and maybe we'll be looking at some additional functionality for governance, risk and compliance, or ITOM or something like that in the future. This is what's going to get the salesman really excited. He can then take that to his boss or her boss, and potentially lay down a plan for that account. So that's what they really want, is not just the initial volume of money, but to have a plan for the account and to have that in their forecast. And believe you me, it will be in their forecast straight away. So only dangle things which are possible in front of them. Don't dangle the moon in front of them if that's never going to happen, because they're going to be on the phone to you every second week saying, when am I getting the moon? When am I getting the moon? Because they will do that because it's in their forecast. But if there is potential and you have vision going forwards for increasing use of a particular platform, then definitely tell them about that, because that's what they're going to want to hear. So I think that's kind of me got to, different areas for discounts. So reviewing or going back on that, you are valuable to the vendor as a customer, not just for your initial purchase. They will probably be, as a salesperson, particularly interested in a larger front end purchase price as well. I should mention that too. So if you think you're going to start with 20 users and then eventually grow to 50 users within the space of a year, you're going to get a much better discount if you start with the 50 straight away. And that's what the salesperson is going to want to see. They will probably get paid much more money on your first order as a new name. They will probably have a massive drop in the commission that they are paid after that first order. So that's me giving away more sales secrets and what drives people. But you're important to them, as is when you buy. That's, again, super important to them. These are the main things that I would like to just highlight to you as bargaining tools. So I'm kind of needing to go get a cup of tea in a minute because my voice is beginning to break here. Hopefully a few people have watched that, and hopefully some more will watch it on the catch up. So the icon directly above me will take you to my website. So this is where I get to do the pitch to say I'm actually a Freshworks partner. So if you want to talk about Freshworks, follow that link up there. It will also take you to the mind map, and you can go download that. That's version 4.0. We're going to produce another one, 5.0, 5.1. Steve's come up with a bunch of other stuff that he wants to add on with non-feature requirements into that mind map, and I've added a load of technical stuff in there as well. So that's can be found above my head. In the middle is the YouTube channel, and Steve, above your head is obviously your website. What can you help people with as well?
So, as you guys know, having seen a few of these episodes now, I'm the independent consultant. I run a firm called Syniad IT. Go to the website there. We do lots of blogs on things like tool selection. I don't know if you can hear that, but my doorbell's just ringing in the background, which proves, I guess, that we are live. Yeah, feel free to go to the website, go to the search bar and type tool selection. There'll be a ton of stuff on there around some further hints and tips. I always want to say this, Martin, because I watch a lot of YouTube stuff. So go to the YouTube. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. That really does help us in getting the channel a bit more popular. We are trying to build something here which is truly useful to the ITSM community. So hopefully you can support us in doing that. But that's all I had, Martin. Thank you.
Okay, and tell all your friends and leave us some comments post live. Yeah, post live. Live happens, the doorbell will go. I did have an Amazon guy delivering a television for me the other week who wouldn't go away, and I had to stop my broadcast and go and answer the door. So yeah, live happens. Next time round, we have got the quick start element. So I know a lot of that's to do with a couple of presentations that Steve has given recently, one at SITS for transitioning to a new service desk, and also a white paper that you have around is it possible to implement an out-of-the-box solution. And I won't let you talk about that anymore at the moment, because that's for next time round. So everybody, thank you for joining us so much, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.
Thanks all.